It's been a few days since the President's State of the Nation address and since the government submitted next year's budget to Congress. On this fourth installment of NEDA's series on the Philippine Development Plan, we'll talk about what the speech and the budget say about the priorities for the next 2 years and the priorities some sectors say are neglected. It's also been a month since the Supreme Court ruled some acts done under the DAP spending program were unconstitutional. We'll talk about how this supposedly hurts the economy. I'm Coco Alquaz. This is ANC Presents Philippine Development in Focus.
Nitong 2013, sa unang pagkakataon, nagkamit tayo ng investment grade status mula sa Moody's, sa Fitch at Standard & Poor's. Sa larangan ng turismo at pangangalakal, malaki ang itinulong ng pagdami ng flights ng ating airlines tungo sa mga bansang kasapi ng EU at sa Estados Unidos. Kasabay ng mga natipid ng DPWH, ang nailatag, napapaayos, napalawak o naipagawa nilang kalsada mula nang maupo tayo, umabot na sa 12,184 na kilometro. Sa Public-Private Partnership Program naman po, mula Disyembre 2011 hanggang nitong Hunyo, nakapag-award at nakalagda na ng 7 PPP projects ang inyong pamahalaan. Ang halaga nito tinatayang 62.6 billion pesos.
As expected, economic gains and infrastructure development took center stage in the President's fifth State of the Nation address. But what made this year's report to the nation different are the circumstances surrounding Aquino. 3 numbers to remember about his penultimate State of the Nation address. 144, as in the 144 billion peso disbursement acceleration program, a key policy of the administration struck down by the Supreme Court. 55% is Aquino's satisfaction rating, his lowest since he assumed office in 2010. And 2 years, that's how much time he has left to seal his legacy. As some analysts put it, the honeymoon is over, and the President's speech shows an embattled administration trying to reassert itself and to reconnect with the people Aquino calls his boss.
At sasabihin ko po sa inyo, mata sa mata, sa lahat po ng inabot natin, ako po'y masabing kontento na ako. Patuloy nating mapapatunayan na the Filipino is worth dying for. The Filipino is worth living for. At idagdag ko naman po, the Filipino is definitely worth fighting for.
With us tonight are Budget Secretary Butch Abad, Secretary to the Cabinet Rene Almendras, and Economic Planning Secretary Arsenio Balisacan. Also with us is the new NFA Administrator Arthur Juan. The questions tonight will come from Peter Perfecto of the Makati Business Club, Hernan Nicdao of the Trade Union Congress of the Philippines, and political analyst Mon Casiple. Also with us are AJ Montesa, Francine Foronda, and Mikhail Solitario of the University of the Philippines Student Council, together with other members of the Volunteer Student Council Task Force. Gentlemen, guests, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Secretary Abad, first question to you. Ever since the PDAF controversy started middle of last year, followed by the DAP controversy, spending growth has been very choppy. By my count, I think there were 3 or 4 months when spending fell. There was 1 month when it was flat. There was also 1 month in June when it jumped 44%, so choppy. But all of these things happened before the DAP was declared unconstitutional. How does spending look like for the rest of the year? And you've just submitted a new budget to Congress. How will it look like for the next 2 years?
Well, Coco, I think it can only get better. For the 5th time, we submitted the budget early, and for this 2015 budget, we are directing all agencies to start their pre-construction or pre-procurement activities starting tomorrow. And they have 5 months to be able to bid their projects short of award, so that on the first day of the first working day of January, they should be issuing notices to proceed. Apart from that, in January, we will continue the regime of GAA as release document. So the GAA itself becomes the release document. So there should be no delay in obligating those funds early in January.
So they can actually hold a bidding this year, even before the budget is officially enforced?
Short of awarding the contracts, yeah.
There's not going to be any legal problem with that?
No, we've been doing that for the past so many years. But this time around, we made sure that the problem before is even if you direct agencies to do that, they wouldn't be able to do it because many of the budgets were lump sum. So we directed them to disaggregate the budget. We are now going to give them full-time back personnel. They are not going to be seconded from existing offices or units. We are increasing the number of backs in big agencies like DPWH, DOTC. We're giving them money to allow them to outsource design, engineering, and feasibility studies. So these things have been done, and it's now possible to do it on a bigger scale.
So when you talk about a chilling effect from this DAP decision, you're not talking about on spending. You're talking about something else?
Yeah, because I think a lot of the problems arising from hesitation of the bureaucracy to spend comes from the recent decision, which I believe Congress can address as soon as they've passed a law to sharpen or clarify the definition of savings, standby appropriations, item of appropriations. The only remaining issue there that may have an impact on the way the bureaucracy behaves is this presumption of bad faith, which impacts on particularly regularity of the way by which public officials perform their duties and functions. I think that has to be addressed.
So you don't see a chilling effect on spending?
Well, if there is right now, but I think it is possible for Congress to address some of the problem. But this whole problem of presumption that normally you're presumed innocent, you're presumed regular. If that is not dealt with by the Supreme Court, then that can have a serious impact on the way, especially if you're talking about, pursuing more vigorously reforms over the next 2 years. That certainly will have an effect.
Okay, we're going to try to get questions from the audience, and the Makati Business Club, together with other business organizations, just yesterday, I think, issued a letter to the president, or sent a letter to the president. It ended with a repetition of what your chairman said a week ago or 2 weeks ago, that you hope that there's not going to be a chilling effect on the government's reform program. Peter Perfecto of the Makati Business Club, when you look forward 2 years, over the next 2 years, what question is topmost in your mind for the government?
I think one of our topmost on the list, Coco, on that letter is all about inclusive growth. We've been hearing that term from day one of this administration. It's been what has been difficult. You hear people saying hindi namin makain yung mga numero. So it's very important. I think it's a very important issue to the people. And when we talk of inclusive growth in the business community, we look at the lack of a comprehensive plan in agriculture and the numbers that have been going down in agriculture. And second, the fact that mining remains in a standstill. Two possible job generators. I wonder if the budget will address these two key areas.
Maybe Secretary Balisacan, you could answer that question, both in terms of agriculture and mining. I think your letter said that you wish that agriculture subsectors had a roadmap the way industry subsectors have them. Secretary.
Yeah, with the appointment now of Secretary Kiko Pangilinan, we expect that developments in agriculture would now be faster, particularly in the in infrastructure development. There's a big infrastructure spending for irrigation, for example, 25 billion for next year, and also monies for farm-to-market roads. The key to getting agriculture moving is really to get investment in infrastructure, particularly irrigation, connect the small farmers to markets, particularly to the value chain, and getting the support services on time, particularly access to credit and access to technology. I think that in the next 2 years, with the assurance that the budget now for agriculture is, and also for the rest of the budget, is now more outcome dictated, based, we can now see a clearer connection between what the efforts are and what the expected outputs from these efforts, particularly in the way we spend money for the sector.
Secretary Almendras, could I ask you about mining, which Peter raised there?
May I just add to what Secretary Garcia said? One of the things that we've done in this administration is integrating the individual activities of the agencies. Like what Sec RC said, we've brought it down to a space definition. In this area, what's the ideal crop? What's the ideal agriculture activity? DPWH says, I'm going to build a road, but why will I build a road? Because we need access. And DTI comes in and says, okay, they need shared service facility, they need technology enhancement. That's being done. So just last week, I had 2 meetings with Secretary Pangilinan. One was on coconut, the other one was an integrated tourism agricultural project. So that is, all the agencies actually have a roadmap to 2016 already. We worked with DTI to come up with the reference roadmaps that you're talking about. That is, some of the agriculture roadmaps have actually been in place. Just revalidating some data and making sure they're integrated to the rest of the other agencies' plans. On mining, I just saw a memo from the Eco Cluster that there is going to be a push to Congress for the new mining law. The economic cluster is recommending that it be a priority. It's a priority bill. We are definitely supporting that. We are cognizant of the impact of mining as a GDP driver. Yes, there are just many other issues to mining that needed to be dealt with. That memo I saw from the Eco Cluster detailed the fact that they were ready to submit it to Congress to push the new mining bill. That legislation is key to enhancing and reinvigorating mining, reestablishing mining into the Philippines.
The key part of that, if I'm not mistaken, must be the tax regime for mining, which the mining sector and I think other business groups have said will not help mining. In fact, might kill it because the rates are uncompetitive compared with other countries.
That's under discussion. That's something that has to be discussed at the proper venue, which is in Congress when all of these other issues will be brought forth.
Was there a way when the private sector and the government and the administration were talking to come up with a compromise there already so that it's the passage is swifter in Congress? Because they have been waiting for this since 2011.
There has been interaction between the private sector and the government team on these issues. But just like Secretary Cesar Purisima will never agree to some of the things the Secretary Himon Jimenez will want for tourism. That's a discussion that needs to be brought forth to the right venue.
So the mining industry just has to lobby in Congress now?
We believe the representation of most groups is going to be more engaged at that level.
Let's get a question from some of the young people in the audience. AJ Montesa is from University of the Philippines Student Council. AJ?
Hi, good evening po. My question is regarding agrarian reform po, because in the 2012 SONA, I think, President Aquino guaranteed that all notices of coverage would have been issued by the end of his term, and the June 30 deadline recently just passed. But in his 2014 SONA, he talked about how the House and Senate bills extending the land acquisition and distribution component of CARPER would be extended. So my question is for Secretary Balisacan po. How big is agrarian reform on your developmental agenda when it comes to developing agriculture and the rural countryside?
Yeah. The access and security of tenure is very, very crucial for poverty reduction, and particularly for the implication of that for access to modern technology, access to credit, and so on. It is high in our agenda. As you have heard from the President, we continue to finish the programs, particularly for those that have been started, because many of those that have been distributed are not yet actually completed. No? Collective titles have been issued, but they are not yet parcelized into individual titles. Those would have to be completed so that those titles that are held by farmers would have collateral value, so that they could access credit, they would have working capital for their enterprises. No? So I don't think that we will see any deceleration in the effort and in the importance of agrarian reform in our development agenda.
Do you have a follow-up to that, AJ?
Yes, actually I do. I'm also a student of the School of Economics, and one of our professors as well, Dr. Raul Fabella, recently wrote a paper, and he said it's time to let go of CARP. Do you have any comments on that sentiment?
No, I think the let go there means that you finished it in terms of, you can't let go when you are halfway. For example, in this thing that I am talking about, that if you have all these collective titles means that you have a document, right, where all the names of the recipients are at the back of that document, and you can't use that document for the banks, because nobody would accept that as a collateral unless the intention is to move to the next step, which is to parcelize that, to transform that collective title into individual title, so that farmers can use that title for credit, so that they can access working capital. So it will be more problematic for the agrarian economy, for the rural sector, if you don't complete that, because that would leave the farming community to be left out in the credit market. No?
Secretary?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add on the line of letting go. This administration acknowledged the fact that it is not enough just to give the farmer a piece of property. There's statistics, there's data that shows, no, you need to give them the support, financial, technical, and everything else. And you will see in our budgets, starting the previous year, that a significant portion of funds have been purposely set aside to help those that already have the land. So the issue of letting go is kind of the end game. The economic impact is when you are able to improve the farm income, the farmer's income at site, at farm gate. And that's a very serious initiative that we're doing, which is why DAR and DA have this convergence program on how to take that through. And it's not just about it's market access, ideal crop, rotation, and all those other things. So you cannot let go of them now, because then the success, the potential economic success of the farmer is not there yet.
Since we're talking about agriculture and letting go, let me ask the NFA administrator, Mr. Juan. There are some analysts and economists who say we should allow free importation of rice and really drop the rice self-sufficiency target. Is this government anywhere near that position?
The rice self-sufficiency program of the government, I think is a very laudable vision of the government, and it should continue as a objective of the government. But having said that, and I noticed in the after the President talked about rice, he also talked about the support that is needed by agriculture. So we should appreciate the efforts of the Department of Agriculture along the line of self-sufficiency. But having said that, we should also recognize that when we fall short a bit on our targets, and with the effect of the typhoons, there is a need to import some quantity to fill in that gap. And that is the role of NFA.
But there are economists who say we should allow free importation because rice abroad is cheaper anyway, so it's good for our good for consumers here to have cheap rice and find other ways to support our farmers.
There are mechanisms by which the private sector can import, and this is the MAV, either country-specific or omnibus. For this year, there is 183,000 that have been imported under the MAV country-specific. There is an additional 187,000 metric tons that is soon going to be approved by the NFA Council, and this is also going to be hopefully awarded to the private sector.
Is free importation, totally free importation, anywhere in our future?
For next year, 805,000 is what is the commitment of the country to the WTO. So that is more than twice the quantity that is allotted for this year. So we are moving toward that direction, I must say, but we have to be sure that we calibrated well, but we are, as pointed out by the NEDA Secretary, we have to move toward that direction.
Okay, I am going to turn to Mon Casiple, a well-known political analyst, to ask him what he has, what's the topmost question in his mind about the next 2 years.
Well, I'm not into economics that much.
So
I'll start with the SONA. Bakit po umiyak si Presidente? We have an impression that he's trying to say goodbye.
Can I answer that?
So my question is this actually. The next 2 years is supposed to be a new social contract. He's basically saying to the people to give me time to do the reforms. Of course, I didn't see the details. He didn't say what reforms he wants to do. I would assume that when he listed the accomplishment, and since most of these accomplishments are basically ongoing, not yet finished, that this would be part of the accomplishment. So my question actually is, does the President see any possibility of changing the team in midstream to make sure that the reforms he wants in the next 2 years can be done? Or does he have the idea that the same team, the same cabinet particularly, should be the one to accomplish this? Is there an assumption here? Since we got a list of people that he mentioned a lot of people, but he also mentioned, he did not mention also some. Is that an indication that there will be changes?
Secretary Almendras.
Which one do I answer first? Why did he cry?
I think that's more interesting.
Okay. When the speech was being prepared, towards the latter part of it, the line was, he was quite firm on the Filipino is worth dying for, which is what his father said. The Filipino is worth living for, which is what his mother said. And his line was, the Filipino is worth fighting for. I believe this was Sunday, which edit I don't remember exactly. He decided to add the line that said, if the Filipino people thought that I would do something not good or illegal or something like that, I would not do that if alone to protect the legacy of my parents. That was the original line of thought. And then it became the sacrifices, which is what exactly came out in the SONA. The sacrifices that my parents went through, I'm not gonna throw that aside. Now, I think the emotion came from the fact that I don't know if people do remember the amount or the extent of the suffering that the family went through. There was so much focus on Chris, Balsi, and Biel crying and all that, because I think they too felt the sense of sacrifice that was there. And that's precisely what the president was trying to say. I mean, my father died for this. My mother did this, or our family suffered tremendously for many years because of a certain belief that this is it. And that's precisely, I think, where the emotion could have come from. That he's not going to do anything that, I mean, after all, his parents have done that. Second point about cabinet, I don't think any one of us is in a position to read the president's mind. He's an active kind of manager. He talks to members of the cabinet individually when the time calls for it. He may not publicly show admonition or correction, but believe you me, he does. And these two gentlemen beside me can witness to the fact that when the president sees something he doesn't like or is not happy with something, he's not going to call Inquirer or ABS-CBN to take a video while he's dressing down a member of the cabinet. He won't do that. But he will dress down a cabinet member appropriately when he feels so in the privacy of his office. So the issue of who he mentioned and who he did not mention, that's always been the case. In every SONA, there are people that are mentioned, there are people that are not mentioned. Some of us are actually afraid to be mentioned because you normally get shot at by detractors once your name is mentioned. I've had that personal experience when I was in energy. There is a relationship between the president and his team. There is a communal relationship, which is him and clusters, him and whole cabinet, but there are also individual relationships. And he talks to cabinet members directly as he feels like it. I don't think any one of us can predict whether there's going to be any change or not. Although I'm very, very much sure that we're all more than willing to step aside anytime, as a matter of fact.
Before we take a break, Secretary Abad has a very
well, I think the last portions of the speech, in my view, really talked about the people power narrative. The father gave his life so that martial rule could be dismantled, and the mother reluctantly accepted to be president and was able to restore the formal institutions of democracy. I think by emphasizing inclusive development, what the president is saying, my task now is to give substance and meaning to that democracy, and he has been doing that from day one. If you look at the huge investments in, social protection, social services, economic growth. So I think that rightfully really is what we should recognize this administration for, giving meaning and substance to that democracy.
You can join our discussion online. Please use the hashtag PHDevelopment or send us a line on Twitter and Facebook and our Twitter and Facebook accounts. You can also watch us on www.abscbnews.com/live. We're taking a short break. ANC Presents Philippine Development in Focus. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're still with Budget Secretary Butch Abad, Secretary to the Cabinet Rene Almendras, and Economic Planning Secretary RC Balisacan. Secretary Almendras, did you want to add something?
No, Mon's question earlier
Yes.
about what was the president referring to about the next 2 years. I think that he's using the illustration of being in one bangka and trying to go across to the better island, and the island is clear. And we have started. Diba? It's so much difficult to start from a standstill. But if you're already moving, you can accelerate. And that's why he used that imagery to say that, hey, things have started moving. Let's work together so that we can move faster and we can get to where we want to go a lot faster. But he also warned that there are people who are trying to slow us down. People are trying to bore holes in the banka so we will sink. But the idea is, napatunayan na natin that we can move, that things can become better. So let's accelerate.
Secretary Abad, you're the most political in the panel right now. The damage that whatever damage the president has sustained because of the attacks on him regarding DAP, etc., how will the government surmount that? How will the administration try to surmount that?
Well, I think if you look at the numbers, I don't think that significantly. For example, the percentage of people dissatisfied with government has moved. I think what grew was the number of people who are undecided, and I think that's the effect of the continuous attacks on the president. Much of it, I don't think deserve. So I think with the speech like that and a more vigorous drive for the next. For those reforms to deepen and broaden them over the next 2 years, I'm confident that the president will be able to convince those people that we are on the right track here, and therefore your continuing trust and support is deserved.
Let me go to Mikhail Solitario of University of the Philippines. Mikhail.
Hi, my name is Mikhail Solitario. I'm a public administration major from the UP National College of Public Administration and Governance. And given the fact that this government puts premium on good governance, how would you assess your respective agencies' performance in terms of implementing or operationalizing this administration's vision of Daang Matuwid?
Well, if you heard the speech of President Jim Kim of the World Bank, and I think if there is anybody who can objectively assess the Philippine situation compared to the rest of the world, and he had very high praises for the way initiatives in pursuing anti-corruption and good governance has been put into effect in this administration the past 4 years. And I think that's really the foundation upon which all of these other reforms are anchored on, and that is why, for example, I can only speak of public expenditure reforms. So we have implemented practically every year reforms that build on top of the other, which has enabled us, as the president emphasized during his speech, we have not raised taxes except reforming the sin tax law. If you look at the debt to GDP, our borrowing has been falling, and as a result, interest payments have been falling. And yet, despite that, we have made unprecedented investments in social protection, in basic education, in public health, in social housing, in infrastructure, you name it, and PPP, in PESA investments in these countries. They have been unprecedented compared to the past administration. And I think that's founded on, the return of trust and credibility of people, and a very close partnership between the president, his administration, and its people.
Secretary, you mentioned the reforms that you're doing in the budget side. Does it hurt when a relatively well-respected organization like PCIJ says that DAP, in implementing DAP or in the disbursements of DAP, it skirted some of the rules and some of the rules that you wanted to put in place or that you have put in place in the general budget?
It's really a question of interpretation, because when you're reforming, you have to operate out of the box. you have to push the limits, the boundaries to as far as possible. And sometimes you do step into gray areas. But, the function of law is not to discuss, especially if you admit that DAP has done this country well. So the function of law is not to limit or to constrain those initiatives. The function of law is to help, to legitimize them so that you continue to push the boundaries into areas that, you've never tried before. Because, you cannot make dramatic changes, if you stay within the line and still stay within the box. What you're trying to do really is trailblaze in the area of expenditure management, and that's what we've been doing.
What's your best proof that DAP has done the country well?
Well, look at the economic growth. Look at the observations of international investment public. Look at the investment grade rating that we have.
But they did not specify DAP.
Well, when did the economy start to pick up? That's the year after we implemented in the last quarter of 2011. DAP is not about savings. DAP is about plugging leakages. DAP is about untangling bottlenecks. DAP is about eliminating wastage. DAP is about ensuring that programs and projects are delivered fastest to the people and the communities. That's broadly disbursement acceleration. So people tend to think of it as simply use of savings. That is a very small part of DAP.
Secretary Balisacan, what's the best proof that DAP has done the country well?
Well, our analysis of the data tells us that growth in 2012, which was 6.8%, right, would have been only 5.11% if the program under DAP was not implemented. Similarly, in 2013, when growth was 7.2%, that growth would have been only 6.1% if we did not have this acceleration.
So you were able to look at the different projects and estimate the projects of those individual, how many was it? 116 projects, and see the results of those projects?
Yes, we made a distinction between government spending for final consumption and spending for infrastructure, including for health and education. As well as we made disaggregated the data as to what sector they were invested in, and that what all other things remaining the same, that's what you would get from the data available.
Let me go to a representative of the labor sector.
Magandang hapon po. Ako po si Attorney Nick Dao. I am from TUCP and from the PTGWO. We are the biggest labor federation in the country today. Our unions include unions in the companies of San Miguel Corporation, Maynilad, Manila Water, Coca-Cola, Nestle, and a host of other unions pa. My partner from the management sector here earlier mentioned about inclusive growth. On the part of the workers, inclusive growth refers to the trickle-down effect of growth and development to the workers and the ordinary Filipino majority who are in the marginalized sector of our society. As mentioned in the Philippine Development Plan, there are three factors wherein kung bakit hindi po pumapasok mga investors sa ating bansa. Number one is the government and public policies which are inconsistent, making doing business difficult here. Number two is the high cost and now imminent loss of power. And number three is regarding po yung tungkol dun sa inadequate public infrastructure, especially the transport infrastructure. Nowhere there na ang isa po sa mga hindrance ay ang matataas na mga sweldo or ang tungkol sa klase ng mga empleyadong meron tayo sa Pilipinas. Our only concern is that in the SONA, there were no concrete programs laid out to address this issue regarding unemployment, underemployment, and especially regarding precarious work. Meaning, ang mga trabahador po natin ngayon kasi meron lang 5 to 6 months ng employment. Yun po ang klaseng trabahong na-generate natin. makalipas po ng 6 na buwan, wala ng trabaho, tapos napapalitan lang sila, tapos siguro makalipas na naman ng 1 taon o 1.5 taon, saka sila uli magkakaroon ng trabaho. Bakit po hindi kaya na-address po natin to sa SONA?
Go ahead,
No,
sir.
I think the SONA precisely addressed that because the way we understand the problem of the Philippine economy and the Philippine society, no, na kung bakit in the past inclusive growth, inclusive development was not there. Number one is that when we talked about inclusive growth, inclusive development, we are talking about being able to generate good quality jobs. That's number one, good quality jobs. Generating good quality jobs mean that you need to have investment. And investment requires again, what we mentioned earlier, that you need to have a favorable climate for investment, you need to have good governance, you need to have address your infrastructure problems, and so on. No? The second aspect of inclusive growth, inclusive development is investing in social capital, in human capital. Poverty in this country and in many places is intergenerational. No? The poverty of the parents transmitted to the poverty of children. No? And we are addressing that aggressively by investing in children, particularly basic health, basic education, and in this conditional cash transfer program that we're implementing, so that we are giving a better future and better option, better opportunities for our children, so that they won't inherit the poverty of their parents. The third aspect of this inclusive development is that when you are not poor or just above the poverty line and you fall, we must have a system that allows us to catch you before you get deeper into poverty. Yung social protection yan. Insurance, mga ganon. And that is very important for us, especially since we are subject to all kinds of shocks, no? And risk, particularly with respect to our location in this geographic location. No? We have this. We are faced with so many disasters, natural disasters. And what we are learning is that while we succeed in lifting many people out of poverty, disasters pull them back. Even non-poor are pulled back to poverty. So in this SONA and in the updated Philippine Development Plan, we are putting there as a third leg of our program, no? This social protection. And we are looking at areas of the country which are vulnerable to these geohazards, and we are addressing these hazards by, for example, the infrastructure developments like flood controls and so on. No? So I would like to think that the SONA, precisely in emphasizing the importance of infrastructure, the importance of good governance, the importance of good institutions, predictable institutions, is addressing that problem of credibility and unfavorable investment climate.
Rene, I'm sure you have a follow-up, but let me jump first to Francine Foronda of University of the Philippines. Francine.
Hello, I'm Francine Foronda from the School of Economics. The GDP growth last quarter was 5.7%, which is lower than what the forecasted GDP growth has been by certain agencies. So I would like to ask, what plans do the administration have to make up for this lower than forecasted GDP growth in the first quarter of 2014?
As you would have seen, we did not reduce the target for the year, no? Which is 6.5 to 7.5%. Our expectation is that the 5.7% is a temporary thing, no? That partly because of the disasters, many disasters that suffered in the latter part of the year, last year, the supply chain was very much disrupted, not only in Yolanda affected areas, but the whole supply chain of the country was so much affected, and the prices have gone up, and I think it was natural for investors to wait until things normalize a bit, no? And I think that's what is happening. So we expect that the growth will pick up faster in the remaining part of the year, and we are still sticking into that 6.5% to 7.5% growth for the year.
Secretary Almendras, Secretary Abad, you want to add to that?
I was going to reply to the labor later.
Secretary Abad?
Yeah, well, as was already pointed out by Secretary Balisacan, in the first quarter, certain, and I'd be more specific, apart from the effects of Yolanda. For example, the DPWH had to recluster projects because they're really carrying on a lot of work, so that there is more work done on the ground, which will accelerate project execution. For example, CCT, they're in the process of reviewing the National Household Targeted Survey because of the damage to 44 provinces would necessitate updating the NHTS. So that slowed down the huge investment in CCT. So I think in the second quarter and the succeeding quarters, the government expenditure program will move on very much faster, which will signal to the private sector, the government's intention to intensify further investments in key areas, construction, social services, and things like that.
Secretary Almendras, you wanted to answer the labor question.
Yeah, before that, I just spent 3 hours of my morning reviewing the performances of the top 10 agencies according to budget, and I just wanted to support Secretary Abad's point on that. Like we measure obligations ratio, the amount of obligations that an agency does of its full year budget, and in the second quarter there is a significant spike in the obligations ratio of DPWH because there was a corrective action. Well, they were doing something in the first quarter, so. The other it's my job to, Butch is focusing on 2015 already. My job is finishing 2014, right? So we have all these ongoing reviews on how we will accelerate the initiatives of government spending. On the labor side, sir, you're concerned about the contractualization, the 5 months, 6 months. This administration proved how serious we were in implementing the law by hiring over 150 inspectors on compliances and issues, and there are
Labor Day commitment.
Labor Day commitments. So the issue that, just to put together what Sec RC was saying, there's the underemployed. Our target is we want the Filipino to be earning more, right? And it's about enhancing, just to reinforce the fact. That's why the President showed a video on the SONA about a tricycle barker who used to just make a living by getting people to ride a tricycle, becoming a call center supervisor and earning a lot more than what the minimum wage would have wanted him to, because that, I think, the illustration that was intended there is, if we do invest into training, if we invest into the Filipino, then he can be trained to take on a higher value job. Because if we're going to compete on the issue of pababaan ng sweldo, some of our neighbors will beat us black and blue because their labor costs are so high. So the intention is move into better quality jobs because they're the ones that are going to pay more. And that also talks about the underemployed. And this contractualization is, there are ongoing discussions between DOLE and some of the major big groups that have been known to be using this, and there have been significant improvements, sir. I can discuss that with you after this, but the Department of Labor can actually give you the statistics or the numbers that show that there has been improvement on that side.
This might be the last question. Peter, from the business sector, what other priorities do you think the government should have in the last 2 years?
Well, I really have to bring this up. No? We are part of the Integrity Initiative. You're the part of government in this whole good governance effort. And we're also part of the Freedom of Information Coalition. The coalition that felt very strongly that there was a chance that the President would finally mention the FOI bill in this particular SONA. But he still did not mention it. And now we're told that it's part of a list of, I think, 28 legislative priorities. but it's, I think, number 22 on the list.
18.
Number 18. So we're hoping that with these three of the brightest cabinet secretaries here, is there a way to convince the president to give an extra push to the Freedom of Information Bill? We know this is legislative, but we also know that he does have a lot of sway on Congress, and it would be good if we can have the FOI law finally passed. After all, that is institutionalizing good governance.
18th is not a reflection of its...
No. Okay, I think the reference to bright has something to do with hairline. Okay. During the World Bank Forum, the president did mention very categorically on live television in front of the whole nation, we will do the right thing on FOI next year or towards the end of the term. It's really a matter of discussing what are the urgent. I think people also need to understand that the president has a limited amount of bullets, sorry to use the equation, as far as legislative agenda is concerned. I mean, the president cannot give Congress and say, I have 100 or 50 or 30 bills that are all urgent, which is which. I'm not saying FOI is any less important, no. We all agree. We live by FOI. I mean, you don't need to put a law about FOI, at least in this present administration. We don't. We give out numbers, we post them on the internet, we don't keep secrets. But we also accept the fact that there are probably some really urgent issues that need to be addressed. And I'm glad that it comes from the business sector, because there are 5, 6 bills that all have to do with the economy that are probably, in my view, from where I sit right now, and this is really a personal opinion, these are actually a lot more critical in accelerating the growth that we now have, in ensuring the sustained momentum of economic activity, and ensuring that we are going to be ready for ASEAN 2015, that we are going to be ready for TPP and all the other things that are happening all over the globe.
Thank you very much, Secretaries Abad, Almendras, and Balisacan, and to our guests in the studio. And thank you for watching. We hope you join us again next Thursday for the last episode of this ANC presentation in cooperation with the National Economic Development Authority. I am Coco Alquas. Good night.